Let's explore the arguments from evolution that expose the flaws in the epiphenomenon hypothesis, which is the widespread belief that consciousness is nothing more than a powerless byproduct of the physical brain. We've already seen some of the absurdities that follow from taking this belief seriously. In this video, we learn why this view is not only absurd, but also highly implausible. First of all, the obvious problem. As the philosopher Thomas Nagel argues, there's simply no reason for consciousness to emerge through purely materialistic evolution. He highlights a core issue with the materialist account of evolution. Why should subjective phenomenal consciousness have evolved at all if physical processes alone are sufficient for the functioning of an organism? This problem is well illustrated by the philosophical zombie thought experiment. Here we imagine creatures that are physically identical to humans but lack subjective experience, meaning they would behave in exactly the same way, even without being consciously aware. If consciousness were merely an epiphenomenon, a powerless byproduct of physical processes, then such zombies should theoretically be possible. They would be nothing more than a very complex machine acting like humans, but without any conscious experience. Consciousness then becomes an unnecessary and inexplicable addition in the materialist framework, as it doesn't even have an active role in the physical processes that drive survival and reproduction. Well, an epiphenomenalist might respond like this. Let's uphold the principle of physical closure. That means that physical processes do not expend anything to produce consciousness. If they did, that expenditure would be lost, as consciousness itself has no causal influence on either the physical or the mental. Instead, let's just propose that consciousness simply happens to accompany certain physical processes like those in the brain, but without being energetically produced by them. It's just the nature of reality that certain physical phenomena are accompanied by mental experiences. Let's not forget that epiphenomenalism is a form of dualism, albeit an asymmetrical one. Epiphenomenalists don't deny the existence of consciousness, but consciousness is dependent on certain physical processes, albeit not energetically caused by them. Yes, consciousness is not necessary for the functioning of the physical organism. Nevertheless, it is there. This might not be intellectually satisfying, but it is how reality is constituted. Consciousness is just there, even if it is superfluous, and we accept that we can't explain why. Okay, so far the epiphenomenalists have a point, although they are lacking any sensible explanation for why consciousness is just simply there and how it is dependent on the physical without being energetically produced by it. There is another argument that plainly demonstrates the improbability or even the impossibility of the epiphenomenalist view of consciousness. The following abductive argument was proposed by William James in his The Principles of Psychology. It is a little difficult to get one's head around though. The condensed argument looks like this. Premise 1. There is a smooth correlation between the utility of stimuli and their hedonic valence. Premise 2. If the pleasantness and painfulness of stimuli had no effects on behavior, then there would be no explanation for the fact in premise 1. Premise 3. If, on the other hand, the pleasantness and painfulness of stimuli do have effects on behavior, we can explain the facts in premise 1. Conclusion: the hypothesis that pleasures and pain are efficacious is a better hypothesis than that they aren't. So what does this all mean? The first premise states that we typically find a link between what we phenomenally feel as good or bad, and with what physically benefits or harms us. As James puts it, it is a well-known fact that pleasures are generally associated with beneficial experiences and pains with detrimental ones. For example, eating when hungry is pleasant, and touching a hot iron is painful. This is what James calls the smooth correlations. There are, if at all, only a few exceptions, for example alcohol consumption to the point of drunkenness, but they do not refute the argument. Premise 2 and 3 contain the heart of the argument. If consciousness has no causal effects, then natural selection could have selected for the beneficial behavior of the organism, but not for the pleasantness or painfulness of the behavior. If consciousness, if the felt pleasures and pains, are not efficacious, it is not evident why there should not be serious mismatches between utility and hedonic value. It then looks like we were unbelievably lucky that we mostly experience beneficial behavior as pleasant and not the other way around. The fact that all well-adapted activity does feel pleasurable to us is an inexplicable coincidence if consciousness has no influence on our behavior. This is the most difficult point to get one's head around. As phenomenal conscious states, like pleasure and pain, can't have an effect on the behavior of the underlying physical processes, They could not have made any difference to reproductive success. Natural selection could not have selected for them. As the philosopher Hedda Hasselmerk noted, given epiphenomenalism, differences in phenomenal properties could not cause differences in fitness. So natural selection would not be expected to favor these smooth correlations over any other ones. And it is extremely unlikely that the indifferent processes of natural selection would have resulted in such a harmonious, benevolent connection between the utility of our behavior and its perceived pleasure and pain. It is so unlikely that one would be better off believing in a benevolent God or a higher power that brought this about, to spare us from, for example, having extreme pain whenever we breathe or eat, and finding joy only in harming our body. On non-epiphenomenalist views, on the other hand, such correlations are not mysterious, they are precisely what we would expect. So it follows that epiphenomenalism is most likely false, and consciousness has some sort of causal power. There's only one remaining loophole for the epiphenomenalist, namely to argue that the smooth correlations are not the result of natural selection, but of other evolutionary processes. For those interested, I've linked a paper by Alexander Klein in the video description. It provides a concise summary of the scientific evidence demonstrating that natural selection, rather than these alternative processes, actually is responsible for the development of those smooth correlations. As we've also seen in the previous video, there are numerous problems associated with the epiphenomenon hypothesis. In future videos, we'll delve deeper into critiquing physicalism in general. Many of the arguments we'll explore will also apply to epiphenomenalism, thus further undermining its plausibility. If you have any questions, objections, or insights, share them in the comments below. I'd love to engage with your thoughts and clarify where needed.